Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Joanne. I'm the adult programmer here at the Ashland Library. Tonight, we are very pleased to welcome for her book talk, Kelly Carter Merrill. Kelly is an educator, consultant, professional facilitator with a very impressive background in higher education administration and counseling and counselor education. She has taught at Randolph-Macon, at the University of Richmond, and she lives here in Ashland. But in spite of all of those other things, tonight Kelly is here to talk about her recently published memoir, Death is All About Me, How Being Near the Dying Brought Me Closer to the Living. Reflecting on the deaths of a number of friends, colleagues, and significant others, and journeying through relationships, religions, marriage, childbirth, and career loss, Kelly discovered that her close experiences with death had been preparing her for how to live. Her memoir chronicles her journey from inner despair to an outward focus on purpose, growth, and spirituality. So we'd like to welcome Kelly this evening. Accompanying Kelly is Kiri Burdan. We want to welcome Kiri. She is the leader of Kelly's book group. She is the moderator for this evening. She is also relatively new to Hanover, so we would like to give Kiri a very warm Ashland Hanover welcome. So,
Okay, so before I ask Kelly questions, I'm going to do just a little reading from her book, just a short paragraph. Isn't this what spirituality is? About seeking meaning and purpose? That had been lost on me for far too long. To obsess over whether events were presented intentionally or not rather missed the point. My life has always been better served when I can find meaning in whatever comes my way. Every moment of life is rich with lessons. If only we do the awareness and reflection work to see these lessons and to accept them. Difficult moments are for experiencing fully, sitting comfortably in the center of them, soaking in the moment, for they hold the truth of life. This is my journey. That's just like a little now you have to read the book, right? You definitely want to read the book. Okay, our first question is, why did you choose to write the book?
Well, first, can I just say, the last line was my mother's suggestion, who is right there. Hello. Hi. And just thanks for everyone coming out, friends and colleagues and Ashland board members and the Honorable Faye Pritchard. High school friends up here too, so this is quite special for me that you're here. I decided to write the book because I've experienced some unusual life events, and anytime any one of these life events would come up, someone would say, oh, you should write a book. So I did. And just to give you some kind of context, I started writing in 2015. It was my 44th birthday, and I didn't know how it was going to end yet. I had an idea of how it was going to end, and you'll see it's in the middle. That there's a false ending. That's how when I started writing it, that's how I thought it was going to end. But there was more living to be done in the course of writing it, and it turns out in writing it, there's new learning and reflection. So I experienced the end after I had already been writing in 2017. It ends in 2017. So I wrote it because of unusual events, which I'll just give you a kind of taste of how unusual. All right, since the day I was born, death continues to be an awkward companion in my life. By the time I turned 40, 10 of my peers had died, including childhood friends and neighbors, high school friends, college friends, a colleague, a boss, and 3 exes. 2 boyfriends and 1 girlfriend. I have 1 living ex-partner, the only one where I initiated the breakup. So the secret to surviving a breakup with me seems to be let me do it. My husband has been warned. A few of the deaths have been quick accidents: drowning, highway accident, a country road accident. 2 were suicides, but most have known they were dying. 3 of these people have died on my birthday, an infamous death day, which I was born on Pearl Harbor Day, which becomes like a theme in the book. I've observed 3 of my birthdays in mourning when I turned 24, 32, and 40. One of those was an ex who died. 2 other birthdays I did not observe at all when I was 18 and 19 for other life adventure reasons. And more than once I have asked, what is it with me and death? If death keeps showing up in my life, maybe it has something to teach me. So that's why I wrote it.
What did you learn? Nope, hold on. What was it like writing the book? First of all, it took you how long to write it?
Yeah, so 2015, I started on my birthday. So I started in December. So 8 years, but I wrote it for 6 years, and then it took me 2 years to figure out how to get it published, which, spoiler, self-published, which also takes a while because I have to do all the work of formatting this, figuring out how to get the page numbers in the right place and the page headers, and I didn't even realize I had to do these too, which so it took a while. But
8 years.
8 years.
And 6 to write it.
When I started to it being in my hands.
Yeah.
But 6 to write it, yeah.
So what did you learn from?
Yeah, so when I started, I've been a lifelong journaler. I've been journaling through all of these life experiences, and so I thought, it'll make a great story. And I'll just pull out all of these journals and just write it all down. And all of this dialogue in here is verbatim. Like, I remember words. So the dialogue is rich because I didn't make it up. It really happened. I thought that I would just be telling the story. And that's not what memoir is, I learned. That telling the story is an autobiography. But reflecting and creating a story out of it and a storyline out of it, a plot, requires pulling meaning out of it, right? So a memoir is pulling meaning out of things, and life isn't a story, so it required me to pull meaning from all of these events, which was really instructive. So it has helped me to process all of this. And in writing about probably the hardest moments of my life, brought up all of the old stuff all over again, and all of the sobbing and all of the crying. And I had to get the details right? And I was actually remembering things that I had forgotten. It became the process was moving all of these events through me. Like, they'd just been there and creating stories about, well, this is what your life is about, Kelly. This is just who you are, Kelly, and everybody dies, everybody you know. And to kind of work through all those stories and let those stories pass through me and now be in the rearview mirror and be working on new stories. But I mean, just like the mechanics of it, I started writing exploiting my bad habit of looking at my phone at night in bed with the lights off by writing myself emails. Like, I know this story's got to go in there somewhere. So instead of trying to write it from the beginning to the end, just say, I know this story's got to be in there. I know this story's got to be in there. And so I would type myself an email and hit send. And then in the morning, I would cut it out of the email and paste it into the outline that I had. And I got 50 pages of writing done that way. So that's how it started. But so I'm in bed, and my husband's asleep next to me, and I'm going, trying not to shake the bed. But, ooh, can I tell the story about, so,
Yes, you
so I had to do a lot of research for this, which I didn't really think I would have to do, but I wanted to make sure I had the dates right and the timelines right, and so I went and looked up obituaries and newspaper articles, and my high school, spoiler, my high school boyfriend died, and there was a newspaper article about it. He was on the front page of the local paper, and I had kept that paper for years and years and was moving to every new home with this paper until fairly recently, before I started writing, going, why do I lug this everywhere? And I just threw it out. And then it occurred to me that I should write it. I'm like, dang, where did it go? So so I'm originally from Fredericksburg. I wrote an email to my hometown library and said, I know that the newspaper I'm looking for is on microfilm, and I need to make an appointment with a research librarian. I want to come up there and spend some time. I want to make sure that there is a research librarian, so can I just make an appointment with that person? This is what I'm looking for. Thanks. And a few days later, I'm walking across campus at Randolph-Macon, and I get an email. I'm like, oh, great, so when are we going to do this? And I open the email, and she found the article, scanned it, and put it in the email. So I'm walking across campus, and I'm just like, oh! I thought I was going to be finding out what I'm doing next week, but oh, this is overwhelming. So it was just a very emotional journey in writing it too.
And you work full-time. You have 2 children.
Yeah.
So when you wrote 50 pages of it in bed, and the other times, where were you?
Oh, yes. So then I started doing personal retreats. So there's a writer's bed and breakfast in Nelson County that I went to called The Porches. Have you heard of The Porches? Oh, there you go. There are other writers in the room, Vernon and Kate. So I went there. I went to a few state parks, got a cabin to myself. I went to my mother's after the pandemic, stayed with her for a while and got some work done. And sometimes put it away for months at a time. Like, it really doesn't take 6 years to write a book. It really doesn't take 2 years to publish and format a book, but for me it does. So it's just, I think I have this sense of, and I've seen some people struggle with this. Just because I don't get it done when I thought I should get it done doesn't mean I couldn't do it. Like, it's still there. It's still, the story's still there. And even though I haven't touched it in a few months, then doesn't mean that I failed. I can pick it back up and continue at any point. And so I just kept doing that. Pick it back up, do a little bit more work, do a little bit more work, until it was finally done.
Did you ever think you weren't going to do it anymore? Or were you just like, I don't know if I'll finish this, or was it always like, no, now that I'm doing it, I'm doing it?
I always knew it was going to be done. The part that gave me pause was discovering how much of my children's story I was telling. There's a lot of my children's stories in here, both of them. And I wasn't sure how fair it was to them for me to be the one telling their story in a public way. I still don't know about that. I tell my younger child's story more than my older child's story. And I know that we need to have a talk someday before he, you know, he knows parts of it.
And he is in the story, but also he is very little in the story. And that was such a huge part of your life.
It was.
So it is an interesting.
It was, yeah. And I posted in a writers group about this, and no one said, don't tell your kid's story. There were a number of mom bloggers who said, this is your story. Sure, they're your kids, but this is your story. And don't let that stop you from telling your story. So, yeah.
So, what was the most surprising thing you learned while writing the book?
Two things, and I know you'll help me remember the second one, so I'll start with the first one. Just what the difference was between an autobiography and a memoir, and the learning that it took for me to reshape the ending, to know what the lessons really were from all of this. Before I wrote it, my lesson was very dispassionate and disconnected. And in the process of writing it, made it a lot more personal. And so the title, Death is All About Me, is a double meaning. Because one of my narratives, as I said earlier, was very much that it was about me. And now that just feels kind of ridiculous. Like, no, it's not. And just, it's obvious to everyone else, but me, I'm like, where's your evidence? Like, I've got crap tons of evidence right here that it is absolutely all about me. So, but it's doing the deep reflective work and moving through all of the hard emotions. And I'll say this, like, if you're someone like my father-in-law who loves literature and just the right artful word and lots of description, I am not your author, because I don't like that. But my writing is very emotional and honest. And so that's what I bring as a writer. And I think, so here's another, I'll go with three things now that I think I learned how to write better. My writing at the beginning is a lot of simple sentences. I cried. And I actually did that initially as a placeholder. I'm like, I don't know how to describe this. I cried. I'll figure that out later. Da, 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 da. And then I just never fixed it. Like, I thought, you know what? That is how I felt about it. I'm like, I cried. Okay. But as I move through it, like, I become a better writer because I think I know what's going on better. Like, I came to understand myself better. And so the other thing is, did
you remember?
Yeah,
okay.
What the book is about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said it's not all about me, and it's also not about death. So good luck finding a new title.
Yes. Yeah. So I started writing the book thinking it was about death and how the best, and you know, it is the most. Some really intense life lessons can be found in the opposite of life. Like when it ends, when it's over, there's some instructive stuff there about when it's happening. So that juxtaposition, but with the help of my editor, I began to see that there was a theme of loss. So maybe death in particular, but loss in everything. So you might, as a reader, think that every chapter is named after someone who dies. And you're like, is this one died? Is this one died? Do they all die? And so not all of them are, but some of them represent loss for sure. A loss of relationship, a loss of career, a loss of identity for sure. And then I had it published, and this gray bar is the proof version. And so this one has typos in it. That one doesn't, I hope. But then I did the proof version, and I put it down, and I said, that book is not about, that book is about parenthood. That book is about motherhood. And Carrie's like, well, yeah, duh. So and I said this for those of you who were here last month, I read an article about writers of fiction, and this seemed to apply to me as a writer of nonfiction, that all of that symbolism and literary themes and stuff, some of it authors do intentionally put in, but some of it they don't intentionally put in, and it's just them. It's just them that's in it. And it's like having other people read their book and find this theme and that theme. Well, I discovered this meant this, and is sometimes a surprise to them, but still accurate and really reflective of who they are as a writer. So it's almost like, and I love this metaphor, having people see your dreams and then interpret them for you. It's like, because we project ourselves onto everything in life, and certainly we project ourselves into our creativity, our writings, and we're sometimes too close to it to see it. But other people can see it, right? So when Kiri reads my book and says, that is about motherhood, and motherhood is about loss. That's what that book is about. So I did not discover that until I had the gray bar version. That my story about death and loss was really all about motherhood.
Do you have anything else you want to say before we open to questions?
I don't think so.
Does anyone have questions for Kelly?
Yes.
So, I don't know if you know this, but in VCU in the English department, we have a rotating set of visiting writers, and memoir becoming the most popular genre currently. We've had a number of people who come to talk about memoir and what memoir does.
Yes.
And I was very surprised, someone who was writing about nuclear fallout and living near the plume, the question was asked, what do you do if you get to the part of the story that's not so interesting? She said, I make it up. And there was a sort of gasp of, but this is memoir. And she said, when you're writing memoir, it's more important to tell a story than it is to tell the truth. Now, I don't necessarily believe that. But were you ever tempted to just like, oh, this sounds like fudge just a little bit because the story's better?
No, because I've had a really amazing life. No, in fact, I was so worried about getting any of it wrong. I was worried about getting any of it wrong. And that's why I was doing all of the fact checking. So some people in here have read it. A week after it was on Amazon, Shannon's mother texted me. That wasn't true. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, it was. Yeah. I
was shocked by her response. I prefer yours.
Yeah, oh shoot, you don't, like, I believe, maybe I'm biased, oh, sorry. Maybe I'm biased, but I mean, I think life is amazing. And life is adventurous and full of stories for even the most boring of us. Even my most boring moments of life, I feel like, why do you have to make it up?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, there was a college friend who died by suicide, and I initially wrote it with her dying in my sophomore year, and then I later discovered it was the next year, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go back and fix that.
Right.
Even though I didn't name her by name, like I just wanted it to be right.
Because of all the coincidences with death that happened around your birthday, do you live your life waiting for the other shoe to drop? I mean, are you in any way nervous about what happens in the future, or did this book kind of put it all in perspective?
Yeah, I think the book is about getting my distance from that narrative. That for sure was a very ingrained narrative for me for years. And getting distance from that has come in waves. And the first one is the false ending. That gave me some distance. It was, again, very dispassionate and disconnected. But it gave me some distance from that. But then that just kept happening and it became more. Yeah, I highly recommend memoir as a way to put your life's hardships in the rearview mirror. Like all of life is a narrative. We create the stories about the things that happen. We create the story about why this is happening. And if I'm going to create this story that this just happens to me because you know me and this is just the person I am, that everyone around me dies. If I created that story, I can create a different story too. In which story causes me misery, in which story gives me hope. And can I tell myself stories that give me hope? Sure.
A comment about how long it took you to write it.
Yes.
I've taken a couple of memoir classes, and one of them was a very well-known memoirist, and somebody asked her, and she said 9 years.
Oh,
So I think you're in good company.
okay.
But the other thing I wanted to ask is, I mean, I totally agree with you about how you tell yourself stories. That's sort of our version of our own life, and that can change. And you can, as you've done, figure out a different way to tell all those stories. But the question would be, what was it about turning 44 that prepared you, that made you get to the point where you said, I'm ready?
So on my 44th birthday weekend was a Randolph-Macon holiday faculty staff dinner, and it was the 20th anniversary of one of the deaths. And someone there said, "Oh, Kelly, happy birthday." And I was like, sure, yeah, that's great. Except, this person died 20 years ago. And then I just got on a roll. I'm like, and that's not the only one. And then there was this, and there was this, and I said, and I was born on Pearl Harbor Day. And he said, what are the chances? So this is a scientist faculty member, and he's like, I bet I could calculate the likelihood of that happening. Like, that is so unusual. That just doesn't seem like how many people in this world would have that? And so something about that conversation helped me put all of this together, like essentially the introduction here is more or less what I spouted to him. Like, this happened, and this happened, this happened. And, but don't worry, I have distance from it now. Lies. And so, and it was my 44th birthday, and I thought, I'm gonna get this done in a year, and it'll be done on my 45th birthday. And I had also long said this. This is a unusual and compelling story for a young person. The older I get, the less unusual this is. Well, and you know, and I think I even say this in the book, my father's mother would call him. He's like, okay, who died? Well, remember our neighbors back on Charlotte Street, 3 doors down? Remember the ones that had the pug? You know, so it's like, well, I mean, that just comes with life. So it is compelling when I could say what I could say at age 30. And then by the time I was 40, there were more. And so, you know, when I write this, oh, when I'm retired, I'll write it. It's like, it's not as compelling. So it just felt like I have to tell it while I'm youngish. 8 years later.
As fascinating as this book is, and it is, it's great. She's a wonderful writer. What she says about remembering conversations, a lot of the story is told through the conversations that she has.
Yes.
And it's just a great method for writing. But as fascinating as this book is, you live a pretty fascinating life right now. Is there a plan for a sequel?
A sequel.
Will you continue to write and publish memoirs?
You know how now.
I know.
It might not take 2 years.
I know how. That's interesting. So I've had two more memoir ideas that I have had. One is about telling my ancestral stories about race. If anyone has read Ibram Kendi's book, How to Become Anti-Racist, he begins each chapter with a story of himself and him having held, so each chapter is about a different kind of racism, and he starts the chapter with a story of him having had that kind of racist idea. So one of his contributions is separating racism from people, that we call ideas racist, not people. And so people can have racist ideas. Does that make them racist? You just have, if you don't have the idea anymore, then no. So he kind of pulls them apart, and he says, and so he's a black man writing this book about his own having held a number of racist ideas. And I thought, what wonderful modeling for a black person to debrief his life of racist ideas. White people should do that. And when I think of all of the literature from white people on racism, it's more instructive to other white people without being self-exploratory. And so one of my ideas is to tell the racism stories of myself and my childhood and my family. Sorry, Mom. But I mean, there's just some, you know, really interesting ones. My mother is a descendant of a Union soldier, and my father is a descendant of a Confederate soldier. And so we have stories on all sides that are fascinating. But so that was one. And then the other one is I have a transgender child, and continuing to figure out how in the world to be, how can I still be me and be a parent to this child who has a lot of needs in the world, advocacy needs. Yeah.
Kelly, don't be afraid to tell that story about racism. There's an author named Kristen Green who wrote There's Something Must Be Done about Prince Edward County.
Yes.
And she found out her grandfather basically helped basic people run the schools that blacks could not attend. So she had to air a lot of dirty laundry. So don't be afraid to tell it.
Yeah.
I'd read that book. I'd read both of those books.
You'd read those? Well, now that I'm, so, my older child is, has a lot of needs. And it's, you'd think reading the book, you would think it would be the younger one, but no, it flipped. But I continue to learn more about him. And given what I knew a year ago, I had a book idea in mind, but we've gone through more discovery with him, and I know more now, and there are already books. So I don't think that is, I don't know.
Don't have to write that book.
I don't have to write that book because I don't have, a position of any expertise whatsoever, and others do. Yeah. And
Were you going to ask a question? I saw your hand up. I did not ask.
Me?
Yeah.
If I stuck my hand up, I
I
didn't
think
know
you were
it,
saying
but
that.
I
You should
was
just
going
speak.
to.
Yes.
I like first-hand you go first. Thank you.
You had a lot to process. Did you go to therapy or was writing it your processing?
The last chapter is about my therapist.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah,
When did you
Or
start
did
going to
writing
therapy?
it?
yeah, that's a great question. So I've seen, I've seen a therapist off and on throughout my life. And so during those hard parts, I was off and on. Yeah. It's not the same, this last chapter person, her name is Journey. She, I think I started seeing her in 2016, so after I started writing it. Yeah. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Comment/question.
Yes.
Have you read it?
I have one correction. I am a high school friend, but I'm also
Elementary school, yes, elementary school friends, both of you, yes.
When we moved here. You did this last month on your birthday.
Yes.
I had not read your book yet, and in the interim, I have read your book. In fact, I read it in 2 days, and I'm not a big reader, honestly. But I
Yes.
loved it. And I think like your journaling helped like recreate so many vivid experiences. I mean, it was really incredible. And when I was reading it, I could totally hear you saying these things. Like the part where you were talking about your son's potential birthday and it being on tax day, and oh my gosh, that means he can't be an accountant because what is it on tax day? Oh, but you're gonna be an accountant because I mean, I could totally see you working this out in your head, and that's why I think you mentioned you might do a book on tape or whatever, or audio.
Yes, an audiobook, yeah.
And I was like, oh, I totally get that too, because I when I read it, I feel like I had your voice in my head reading it, and it was awesome. Like I loved your style of writing. And the question I have is if I could see how your perspective or opinion about how Pearl Harbor Day, your birthday related to you, kind of evolved, throughout the book. What the death is all about you kind of evolved. It may not change, but also included this and this and this loss and whatnot. So I'm wondering, like in 5 years or 10 years or whatever, but what other meanings to these words you've written, you might find, or I might find, because I feel like you found But my other question is, I've met your husband several times.
Yes.
He's always seems like such a nice, even kid. And there's a lot of, conversation. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad somebody else talks to their husband this way. But how is he?
How is he? That poor man. My husband is a very nice and kind man, and you may read the book and think otherwise. My hope is that it is very relatable and it's very human, and I tell the story of us going through some very hard times together and how we managed that. And I call him an asshole twice.
In the book?
In the book. In the book. And he does not like that. And he does not go by his real name in the book at his insistence. He wants people to know him. He's like, I don't want someone to read the book, decide they know me, and then meet me. It's like, okay.
I have to say, if you're a guy and you read this book, you're going to totally relate to Tim.
Oh, yeah.
That's his real name.
Dan. His name is Dan.
You totally relate to Dan.
Yeah.
There are so many times I've been on the receiving end of Kelly's conversation.
Yeah. Yes.
Everything Kelly wrote, I'm like, yeah.
So, yeah, our whole thing is like, look, you're a human and I'm a human, and we experience something very human about our human children. And everything that happened is understandable. And it might be regrettable. You might want to take things back, but where would we be now? Like, what if we experienced all of that in a nice, shiny, perfect way? Like, we wouldn't be who we are now. So I think he understands, he gets it. And I thought I tidied it up in the end. I said, I fixed it in the end. The end says we're okay. He's like, yeah, but you gotta say it more. Okay. I think it's hard. And I think there was definitely a point in my life when I blamed him for a lot. And it's taken this reflection to see how I contributed to things, but also how powerful this world is in this, whenever a student writes a paper and they use the word society, I recoil. I'm like, what is society? Screech, what do you mean? What do you mean? But we have cultural norms that set up this life that we all feel like we need to live, and we get stuck in it. And sometimes that is powerful and more powerful than any of us. And so maybe the blame goes to that and not to him, but.
Thank you for writing this. I will read it before I finish my book, and do not sue me, because it's entitled, You Were Not There When I Cried.
That's right.
And unfortunately, I do not stay up at night in titling. So it's on 117 pieces of paper that are in 117 different places. My question is about, and if necessary, I'll give you an example, about how honest and authentic can we be? You were not there when I cried. So the stories about my family I will tell, because they're my family stories. But I have taught full-time in 4 different colleges in 4 different places. And because of my personality, students have come and talked to me about every situation imaginably that humans can talk about. So my question is, how authentic can I be? Quick story. White female at a very, very rich school picked me up in her $1,000, gazillion-dollar Mercedes. I have an afro and a dashiki. She takes me to Houston for a chicken sandwich. She says, Professor Jefferson, my problem is, I'm worth $38 million. The guy I'm dating is only worth 12. He can't take this ring off my finger and put on another ring, and I don't know if I should marry him. And then she said, and he beats me. Can I name the school and the location? I mean, this is a big city in Texas. Very, very rich school in Texas.
Right.
How authentic can I be?
Telling
Because
others.
that's part of the story. That this is a wealthy school, so I can't tell that story about Randolph-Macon or the College of Worcester or Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
But it does apply to Southern Methodist in Dallas.
So I think I've faced some. So my editor said very clearly up front, any of these doctors, any of these MDs, you cannot use their name even if you wanted to. Like, you just cannot. Don't do it. Everybody else, you know, it's your.
I don't remember the names. I won't know names.
Yeah, everybody else, you know, it's my story, and I can tell it using their names. I can. They can come after me if they want, but also, me personally, I am not looking for conflict. I don't want to upset people, and so I tried to get permission from everybody, and people who I couldn't get permission from, I changed their names. Shannon's mother saw the draft, already saw it. She knew it was coming. But some people, I changed more about them than, so all the places, the colleges, the institutions are named. The people, their names are changed, and some of the details are also changed. In the very first chapter, I tell a juicy story about someone I went to high school with. And one of my early readers who I went to high school with immediately knew who it was. And I do worry if that, because a relative of his lives in Ashland. But do you remember? The third ex who dies.
I didn't know they were in Ashland.
The third death, but chronologically he was the first.
I mean, what you wrote about happened.
Yep.
And there's not, and the way you wrote about it is very factual often, you know what I mean? So, and anytime I feel like there is something that, you know, maybe somebody or somebody's mother wish would, you always have a redemptive, you know, side to that too, you know what I mean? So, it was amazing, but I do see where it's nice to get, you know, permission-ish.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's also kind.
I was worried about Maria. So those of you who've read it, Maria not approving of what I wrote about her. But I gave her a chance. Like, do you want to read it? Because I write about this and I write about this. She's like, nah, I trust you. And I'm like, oh.
She can write her memoir, you know? So.
But she did tell me what name she wanted. So I gave her the name Maria.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
I have one. I mean, now that I have not read it, and listening to all this, I'm sure the ending was cathartic for you. But did you have any other feelings when you're like, you're done, and I mean, I know there's always tweaking and stuff, but I'm done. Were you like relieved? Were you like, I gotta think of something new to do, or what?
Oh.
How did you feel?
Yeah, I'm so glad that it's done. Because it's just been like hanging there, like, hey, do you wanna? Yes, I'd rather do this other thing. I'm so glad it's done. I don't know what it would take to get me to sit down and start writing another one. Right now it's just ideas, and I might Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the hurdles to getting this published by a publisher is they want to publish multiple books from an author. And so you only have one book in you, maybe two more, 24, we'll talk, but no. It's like, okay. Yeah, I thought you were going the route of, like you're done, like.
So do you still take your phone to bed with you? Yes.
But it's like solitaire games. I'm just back to my old nonsense. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question about the cover, because I think
Yes.
it's a beautiful cover.
That's a great question.
Did you select it, and did you pick that one and that was it, or did you go back and forth?
So
Did
I
you
have
draw?
I have amazing friends. I have a friend who's a graphic designer, and she said, I want to do your book cover. And so I gave her some ideas. I love tiny art. So I pen and inked and watercolored tiny scenes from the book. And there were like 16 in a grid across the cover. And then she liked that a lot of the books are direct, portions of the book have direct quotes from my journal. So she made it look like a journal page. And I like that too. But I really love authors who can do something visually and not just with words with their book. If you've ever heard of David Eggers, he's an amazing memoirist. His memoir was A Staggering Work of Heartbreaking Genius, is the full name of the book. And he self-published and just did some really amazing things. Like he has, not his memoir, but another book, his first novel, it starts here. And then you open it up and it keeps going and keeps going. And at some point the font changes, so when I first opened it up, I was like, what is this? Is this design? This is design. Oh, this must be where the book starts. And it took me a while of reading the book before I eventually was like, wait. And I read the cover, and it gives away what's going to happen in the end. But you don't know how it's going to happen. So then it's like, oh, well, that's an amazing ending. Like, I got to figure out how it gets there. And then went for long pauses. He'd have like 3 blank pages. He'd use emojis back before emojis were a thing. Like the little car went fast, zoom. And I just love the visual elements of it. And so in the cover, I wanted it to tell you something about what was inside. So the cover is an Easter egg. It's a surprise. It's a present for you. It's something that's in the book that's described that you could miss. You could read about it and miss it and keep going. So if you find it and you text me what page number, yes. But it's I like that because it's very cheery and happy. And I kept telling people, oh, it's a book about how all these people died, but then I learned life lessons from it. And it seems like it's a sad story, but it's not. It's really uplifting. No, it's sad. It's like, no. So, I just love the juxtaposition of death, brightness, and cheery, and I think that is what the book is about. It's taking kind of these opposite things, life and death, and finding lessons of life through death stories. But yeah.
Any other questions? I think we'll wrap up, and I think I speak for all of us here that we're really grateful you wrote this book. And those of us who've read it, we love it, and those who have not read it, you will love it. And yeah, we're glad that you went through that whole process. And I will say one thing, you asked the question, like, how did you feel at the end? And I know that one thing you talked about was feeling nervous, because you're putting
Ooh.
yourself out. Like, here's all of me.
Yeah.
Here you go.
So, kind of in two waves of that. The first was when I first started writing this, nobody knew me. Like, I didn't even have friends. I mean, and so I just kept thinking, whoa, this story has to be told. This story needs to be told. This story could help someone else. And then it just got really intensely personal, and to the point where my sister-in-law was one of the early readers. She's like, that's brave. I was like, why? Why is it brave? She's like, that's vulnerable. That's public. And I was like, so? But then it just started to be like, oh. And back then, what's different from me then and now is not only did no one know me in the public eye, and I think most of you in this room know me, there are people now who don't like me, who might be very invested in learning about the hardest parts of my life to figure out how to exploit them and hurt me.
Politically.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's some power in me being the one to tell the story, but they could certainly twist it. It's not hard to see how my story could be used against me.
You are very brave.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're brave.
Yeah.
Writing this book for us.
Thanks. With not being colored.
And as president of the Kelly Merrill fan club, I have to say, she does tours around town.
Oh, I do.
The one that you did of the Richmond
Yes.
slave trail
Yes.
was remarkable. You've also done ones of the Portsmouth area, the Great Dismal
The
Swamp.
Dismal Swamp.
Yeah.
Yes.
Take one of her tours. The museum hosts them every once in a while. I think Diane and Dave went on the Richmond Slave Trail one, but it was really fantastic.
Yay.
There's
She's
also books for
multi-talented.
sale.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So thank you,
Yeah.
Kelly, for coming, and congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
For people who have not read it, Kelly does have copies in the back for sale. If you just can't wait to get your hands on one. And Carrie, thank you for facilitating, and welcome
Yes.
to Hanover. And
Yay.
thank everyone for coming. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.
And